friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel and welcome to day 8 of my 2018 Valentine Card Series. Today I'm going to be using this stamp set from My Favorite Things called Berry Big Adventure, and I will also be using their Free Spirit 6x6 paper pad. I've stamped my images with MFT's Black Licorice Hybrid ink on some Copic friendly cardstock, and I'm going to be coloring with my Copic markers today. Starting with the bear, I'm going to be using E25, E27, and E29 for the majority of his body. So I'm taking that E29 and laying in my shadows. So I'm having my light source come from the front, so it's going to be lightest in the center and darkest all around the edges. And that's also going to make him seem to have a more rounded appearance and just be a little bit more three-dimensional off the page. So once I have that E29, I'm going to come in with my E27 and blend the edge of that. And I'm working in small sections today since he is a rather large image. I also blended with the E25 and I felt like I needed a fourth shade, so I brought in the E23 as well. Then I'm going back to my darkest shade, that E29, and I'm going to color in his ears and his arms. Since these are both relatively small areas, I felt like I could do them all at once. The inks blend best when the paper is still wet and saturated so that the colors can kind of mix and meld together, and that's why when you have a larger image like this guy, it's best to work in smaller sections. And I've had several questions lately about the paper that I use. I personally use Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock, and I bought a ream of this back in the day when I used to use Spectrum Noirs, so I still have some, and I really love this cardstock. I think it works great with alcohol markers. But there are many other brands on the market. I know Copic makes their own. A lot of people swear by the Nina Solar White Classic Crest 80 to 100 pound cardstock. Gina K Designs also has one that I've heard is really good. So there's lots on the market. You really just want to maybe try different options and see what works best for you and your coloring style. The main thing is that it is a thicker cardstock with kind of a slicker surface, so that the cardstock doesn't act like a sponge and just suck all the ink out of your markers, because you will have trouble keeping the ink inside the lines if that's the case. So cardstock is really important. And the other important thing is, of course, your ink that you stamp your images with. There are many out on the market. You just want to make sure that it is alcohol ink compatible. So going back to our Copic coloring, for the rest of his body I'll be using E50, E51, and E53. And I'm starting with that E53 and just outlining the edge of his belly, and then I also will add just a bit of a shadow down towards the bottom. I want the sun to be just slightly overhead. That's why the shadow is on the bottom of his arms and feet. And then I'm just blending towards the center with the E51 and the E50. I'll color the little pads on his feet and the insides of his ears exactly the same, just in that circular motion, real quick and easy. And the pad on his hand is really tiny, but I did manage to squeeze in all 3 shades, and I colored his muzzle the same as well. I am trying to simplify the color palette as much as I can, since there are quite a lot of images on today's card. But hopefully you guys enjoy it. It's been a while since I've done a longer coloring video, and scene cards are just my favorite to create. For his nose, I'm using W5, W7, and W9, and starting with that W9, I'm just coloring upward. That way I can leave a little highlight on the top of his nose with the W5. I'll add the R02 to give him some nice rosy cheeks and to tie in that peachy color that's going to match our pattern paper. For one of the leaves that's poking out of his headband, I'm using R85 and R89, And even though these colors are right next to each other on the color chart, they are quite a bit different. So I will go back over that a couple times just to get the blend nice and smooth. And I'll also use those two shades on the feather tops of his arrows. And I'll give him a bow to match. So I'm just coming in with that R89 from both ends and then using the R59 in the center. For the other leaf that's poking out of his headband, I'm using YR04, YR07, and YR09. Again, just coloring darkest to lightest from the base. And I will also color the center of the flower on his headband with the YR07. And I'll color all the other flowers with those three shades as well. For his quiver, I'm using B21, B23, and B29. And I'm just putting the darkest right behind him where his body would cast a shadow on it. And then blending up with the B23 and finishing with the B21. And I'll also use the B21 and the B23 to color in the flower on his headband. So I'll start with the B21, just coloring in the flower solidly. And then I will come back in with the B23 and just add little flicks of color right down the center of each petal. And with that B23, I'm also going to color in the three little dots that represent the orange flower's stamen. For his headband, I'm using YG93, YG95, YG97, and YG99. And I'm just coming in from either edge with that darkest color and shading towards the lightest in the center for the highlight. And then I will also use those same four shades to color in my two trees. And for those, I'll be shading on the left-hand side. So I just turned my paper to make it more comfortable. And I'm going to begin flicking in the color darkest to lightest from that left-hand side. And for this pine tree, whenever it comes to one of those little breaks in the sections, I just draw a little bit of a longer flick across to indicate some separation there. And the other tree I'll be coloring exactly the same, so I'm actually going to skip that in the video just because it's quite long already, but I just did the same exact process in the same four shades. And I also colored in the leaves of my flowers with that YG95. For the bush, I'll be using G24, G28, and G99. So that's quite a jump to the G99. And this is not the same one I was just using. That was the YG99. So this is just the G, not the yellow-green, but the green. So I'm starting with that G99 and just laying in some darkness on the left-hand side, just as I did the trees. And then I'm going to come in with the G28 and finish with the G24. And because there is quite a bit of difference here, I am going to go over this a second time just to add another layer and help the ink colors to blend. But I wanted to add in that little bit of olivey color to kind of help it be more cohesive with the other trees and also match our pattern paper. For the tree trunks, I'm going back to the first combo we used, the E25, E27, and E29, and I'm just putting the shadow right up under the branches because that's where the deepest shadow would be cast. And even though it's the same shades we used on our bear, it looks different because there's more of the darkness there. And there's a final look at all of our coloring. And I am making two cards at once today, so I'm going to trim out two pieces of Bristol Smooth cardstock with the MFT linked chain oval frames. And I just used my pick-me-up tool to help me pop out that delicate frame. So pretty. And I will set those aside and actually work with the negative piece from the center. And I'm going to blend on some distress ink. I'm using Tumbled Glass and Forest Moss. So I'm just going to turn this sideways and grab an ink blending tool and sponge on the Tumbled Glass for the sky. And then I'll turn it the other direction to sponge on some Forest Moss for the ground. And the reason that I love using this Bristol Smooth Surface cardstock for any kind of distress inking is that it blends really smoothly on top and it makes it really hard to mess up. So I did get a little bit too much ink right there at the top, but the more I blend, the more that kind of just disappears into the cardstock. It blends much easier, for me at least, on this cardstock than on any regular kind. The sky was still a little too pale for the look I was going for, so I did decide to bring in some broken china as well, and I just sponged that all around the top edge and left the tumbled glass in the center. I put that inside my MISTI, and I'm going to take some VersaFine Onyx Black ink to stamp my sentiment. And I did put that at a little bit of a curve so that it would mimic the top edge of the oval. And I stamped it twice to get a good impression. And while I have my MISTI out, I'm also going to stamp the inside of my card. I'm using Peachy Keen ink from Lawn Fawn to match the Peach Bellini cardstock from MFT. And I'm stamping that bear once again, as well as the sentiment that says bear hugs. To assemble my focal panel, I'm taking some Tombow Mono Multi-Glue and adding it to the back of each of my images. And I'm going to start with the bear in the very center, and I just want to tilt him a little bit so that none of his feathers or leaves are covering up any part of the sentiment. And then I can add my little trees and foliage all around him. So I added the 2 trees and a cluster on the right side, and then I'm adding my bush on the left side, and then I can add a few little dots of glue to adhere my flowers up in the foreground, kind of around him, so that he's kind of sitting in a field of flowers. I've trimmed down my pattern paper with the MFT A2 Stitch Rectangle Stacks Set 2, and I'm going to add some glue to the back of that. It's going to give me a 1/16 inch edge all the way around, so it'll let that pretty peach cardstock show through. Then I'll grab my focal panel and add some more liquid glue to the back of that and center it on my card. The frame is super delicate, so I'm going to take some more liquid glue and just add a little dot to the centers where the scallops converge and just go all the way around the edge really quickly. And then I can set that into place right over top, just making sure to line that up very carefully before I press that down. And then I'm going to set an acrylic block on top of that to hold everything in place while it dries. Now this card wouldn't have to be a Valentine card if you didn't want it to be, but since I do, I'm going to take a little heart from the Once Upon a Time stamp set from MFT and stamp that down on the bear's belly, and I'm going to color that in with the R02 that we used to give him the rosy cheeks. And then I'm also going to take 2 of the hearts and stamp that down on the inside just to reinforce that whole love theme. So I'm just going to line up my hearts on a little acrylic block, and then I will stamp those in the Lawn Fawn Peachy Keen ink once again. So now I'm going to bring in my second card, which is very much the same. I just used a different piece of pattern paper for the background, and I also layered the trees and foliage a little bit differently on the focal panel. I'm taking a black glaze pen and going over the bear's eyes just to make them look nice and bright. And that is going to complete our cards for today. There's another peek at the inside and a comparison of both cards. I hope you guys enjoyed the longer coloring portion of this video. Coloring is my favorite part of card making. Let me know in the comment section below what's your favorite part. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't done that already. Here's 2 extra videos from day 8 of the previous 2 years of Valentine Card Series, so hopefully those will tide you over until the next one. Until then, I hope you all have an amazing day. Bye-bye.